And I've also done some research on various ways that people try to handle their stress. And basically what we're dealing with here today, if we remember the stress response, here's our perceived threat, and the fight or flight turns on. We're all familiar with this, right? And then chronic stress is the result of it staying out here. Well, what I'd like to do today, there's really two places that we can have an impact on this stress response. There's two places where we can do something about it, and that's the focus of today, is what we can do about it so that it's not going to be as problematic as we mentioned the other day. And essentially there's two places. The first place is right here, where when we have an event that happens, where we do something in our heads that prevents the stress response from turning off. Essentially, where we try to dismantle the threat. See, in my opinion, if there is no sense of threat, then you won't have any stress response. You have to have some sense of threat, some sense of this is going to hurt somehow, emotionally, socially, physically. If you don't have that thought, well, you don't have to worry. Now, we're not going to spend quite as much time on that, because most everything we'll do from Wednesday on through the semester will be focusing on that aspect, this area right here, and our thinking. But where we can have an immediate impact as well is where we keep, where we turn off the stress response once it has been initiated, where we deactivate the fight or flight response. And there are a large number of things that we can do that help to do that. Now, what I'd like to do, to make this a little more interesting, is maybe kind of how we did it the other day, where we look at different ways that people do it and where we categorize it. And I'm going to put this up here. And then what I'd like you to do, just in your head, is just think of ways that you or people you know try to deal with stress. Whether it's effective or not doesn't really matter a whole lot. I want us to analyze them for effectiveness and see why we would say, well, this really works, or in terms of how it can impact the fight or flight response itself. Does that make sense? So if you were thinking of things that you do or things that people you know do, then let's throw them out and then see where would we put it and why would we put it in this category rather than this one and this one. Okay, so just kind of let's start with something, anything that comes to mind.
Eat junk food?
Eat junk food. Okay, where would you put that? Really? How come?
Because it doesn't really help you at all. Well, I guess if we talk about with blood sugar going up that.
That's a good thing?
Well, like with the fight or flight, you're saying that we need the more energy because the body is telling it something needs it.
Okay.
So you do it.
But the reason why you wouldn't want that is,
It's not good for you.
yeah, and more than 99% of the time, you're not going to use it right away, right? You're not actually following through on that message to run or fight.
What if you actually do use something healthy, like drink a quart of maple syrup and then go running? Because then you're getting your sugar plus you're following through on the message.
Or maybe, yeah.
Then it's not a Twinkie or whatever, you know?
Well, what you may be focusing on more is the then you go running part.
So you're getting your sugar that your body is telling you you need, and then you're actually getting rid of your fight or flight response.
Yeah, if you're following through on that part, then no big deal. I'm convinced that you can almost, if you exercise enough, you can almost eat anything you want. My little brother was a trail guide down in St. George, where he'd take really rich, overweight people and they'd walk around all the trails and the canyons and places down in southern Utah. And he could not eat enough. He had about 6,000 calories a day, you know, and that was mostly in the form of candy bars. And he was, you know, he was this fit, mean mountain guy. Didn't matter a bit what he ate, because immediately, the instant he got it in his system, his muscles would use it up. So I think that's maybe what you're saying, Michael. Okay, good. What else? What other things do people do, and then we say, well, where would we put it?
I like throughout like sports stuff, if there's people that don't like to do like herb cutting before.
Cutting?
Yeah, like they cut themselves.
Yeah.
That's obviously terrible. People do that.
Why do they do that? I mean, what's the psychology?
Like, well, I asked one time, and they feel like they're letting like all the like stress and pain like out. So I figure it feels good.
Doesn't it just like raise adrenaline or something?
I don't know if it does that. Here's what I think about that is,
Not much more, I mean like they've been like depressed about it.
Yeah.
that's a lesser pain
Yeah.
than the emotional pain
So
they're
the
feeling.
pain's coming out, but like when they bleed.
Yeah.
That's what somebody told that does.
Really?
that. Yeah.
See, in my mind, it's kind of like why people eat sugary stuff, because they're in so much pain emotionally that anything less than that is a good choice to put their mind on. And when you're cutting yourself, I've had friends who have. This one person we knew, she was just, her arm was just like a stair or a ladder of lines, and she said, "This feels less painful, and I focus entirely on this, and it takes my mind off the emotional pain, temporarily." But, and I think anything like that where we're self-inflicting pain, it's better ways. But I think that's the argument for it. Okay, good. What else?
I was gonna say playing athletic event, whether it's soccer, basketball, going out, just.
Okay, where would you put it? Good, better, or a good, questionable, best?
For me, the person myself would be best.
Best?
That's, for me, it would be, because I get a little stressed sometimes, I'll go out with some friends and go play some tennis or soccer or something like that, and afterwards, then my mind's a little bit more clear, I'll take my mind off the stress, I can come back with a better decision of what I need to do instead. So for me, it's that.
Okay. Now, there's two or three reasons why I think that's the case, and I would agree with you. If you like doing those things, if you enjoy doing those things, then that would be something that I would say, yeah, good call. One thing is, it's if you're doing something that's sports related, then you are following through on that. You're letting the hormones run their course. You're letting the blood sugar run its course. You're letting the blood fat run its course. You're letting the chemistry run its course that it naturally would in the fight or flight response. So there's one reason. Two other reasons that I can see why, bless you, why doing those kinds of things are so valuable for us. And one has to do with where your mind is and where it's not when you're doing those things. When you're playing racquetball, for example, or tennis or whatever, and you don't necessarily have to win, or you don't necessarily have to, prove anything to anyone, but you're just playing for the enjoyment of the game. Where's your mind going to be? What's your mind on? And where is it not? Yeah, your mind's focused on what's happening. We're going to spend probably 2, maybe